My wife cheated on me with 2 guys. I confronted her and ran away, then found out she was hiding even more. So, here I am, Reddit. This is a story I never thought I'd be telling. But here we are. My name's Jason, 34, and I've been married to Rachel for 6 years. If you'd asked me a month ago, I would have said we were that couple, solid fun and still totally in love. We have no kids, but we've been talking about starting a family soon. I guess you could say we were the power couple among our friends. People would even joke that we made them sick with how perfect we seemed. Now, looking back, I can see that things weren't quite as perfect as I wanted to believe. Rachel started working a new job about a year ago as a project manager for a tech startup. She's always been driven and ambitious, which I loved about her. But after she got that promotion, she started to change. It wasn't anything huge, just small things. Late nights at the office became more frequent, and she was always busy. When I'd suggest doing something spontaneous like we used to, she used to be all about last-minute road trips and weekend getaways, but suddenly, she was glued to her phone even during our downtime. I remember thinking, this is just a phase. Work's stressful right now, and she'll come around. I wasn't some clueless guy, ignoring the signs, though. I noticed how she'd started dressing a bit differently, more stylish, sexier even, which I didn't mind at first. I thought maybe she was just taking care of herself more, but it started to feel like she wasn't doing it for me. Every time I asked how work was going, she'd brush it off with vague answers like, "It's just busy, you know? Nothing to worry about." At first, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We'd been together for years, shared everything. But then things got weirder. Rachel started making excuses not to hang out with our mutual friends, or she'd leave me alone at parties while she disappeared to make a phone call. It wasn't just once or twice. It was becoming a habit. I guess that's when I started to get this gnawing feeling that something was off, but I pushed it down. The real turning point came one Friday night. She had been out late with the team for the 3rd time that week. I was sitting on the couch waiting for her to come home, scrolling through random memes on my phone to kill time, and this stupid ad popped up for one of those new gadget home assistants. You know, the ones that let you control your house through an app and listen to music or whatever. I don't know what possessed me, but I remember we had one in the living room that Rachel had set up. I was bored, half joking with myself, so I said, "Hey, Alexa, what's Rachel been up to lately?" It was a dumb thought, right? I didn't expect anything to happen. But then Alexa said something I never expected. It replied, "Playing music for Rachel and Chris at 2 a.m. on Tuesday." My heart stopped. Who the hell was Chris? And why was she playing music for him in the middle of the night? That one sentence from Alexa turned my world upside down. Playing music for Rachel and Chris. I didn't know a Chris from her work, not anyone she had mentioned at least. My mind went into overdrive. I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Could it have been a glitch? Maybe Alexa misinterpreted something. Or maybe it was just a friend from work who happened to drop by. But then I remembered the time. 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Who invites a friend over at that hour? It didn't add up. I tried to keep calm, but curiosity and paranoia got the better of me. Rachel still wasn't home yet, and I had no idea how much longer she'd be gone, so I started digging. I opened her laptop, which was usually password protected, but she must have forgotten to log out. The screen lit up, and there was her email wide open. My stomach tightened as I hesitated, telling myself I shouldn't snoop. But at the same time, I couldn't shake that sickening feeling in my gut. I told myself I was just looking for reassurance, that I'd find nothing, close the laptop, and laugh at myself for being paranoid. I was so wrong. The first thing I noticed was an email thread between Rachel and someone named Chris. I could feel the blood draining from my face as I clicked on it. The most recent message was from Rachel, sent just a few days ago. "Hey, I can't stop thinking about last night. When can we meet again? I miss you already. Let me know when you're free to come by. Jason's going out of town this weekend, so maybe we can get more time together." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop reading. The email thread was full of flirty messages, plans to meet up, and even some explicit photos that made me feel like I was going to be sick. There were weeks, months even, of exchanges, all happening while I was sitting at home, completely clueless. I couldn't believe this was happening. Rachel, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, was sneaking around with this guy behind my back. The worst part, I recognized Chris now. He was her new colleague, the one she always mentioned in passing. "Oh, Chris said this at the meeting today," or "Chris has such a weird sense of humor." I had never thought much of it. He was just some guy at her job, or so I had thought. My head was spinning as I scrolled through the messages, my heart pounding. There were dates and times that lined up with her, work dinners and late nights at the office. The more I read, the more everything started to make sense. All the little things I had been dismissing, her distant behavior, the sudden change in appearance, her constant excuses for not spending time with me, they all clicked into place. It wasn't just emotional, it was physical. I couldn't avoid the explicit details laid out in the messages, the way she talked about him, about their time together. It felt like someone had torn my heart out and stomped on it. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated. I sat there, staring at the screen in disbelief. I didn't know what to do next. Should I confront her right away? Should I gather more evidence? Should I tell someone? I felt completely alone in that moment, unable to process how the person I loved and trusted could do something like this. Then, like clockwork, I heard the familiar sound of Rachel's keys jingling at the front door. She was home. As soon as Rachel walked in the door, I felt a surge of anger and confusion, but I tried to stay calm. She looked completely normal, like nothing had changed, as if the world hadn't just come crashing down around me. "Hey, sorry I'm late. Work ran long," she said, setting her keys down and giving me a quick, casual smile. It was the kind of smile that used to make everything feel right, but not anymore. I couldn't hold it in. "I know about you and Chris." I blurted out before I even had time to think it through. Her smile dropped instantly, and for a split second, I saw panic in her eyes before she quickly masked it with confusion. "Chris, what are you talking about?" she said, feigning innocence. "He's just a guy from work. Why are you even bringing him up?" I wasn't buying it. "Don't lie to me, Rachel. I saw the emails. I know everything. And Alexa, she mentioned him too. Playing music at 2 a.m. for you two? Stop pretending." Her face went pale. For a long moment, she just stood there, speechless. Then she sighed, dropping the act. "Okay, fine. Yes, I've been seeing Chris. But it's not what you think, Jason," she said, her voice defensive now. "Not what I think. Really? I read your emails, Rachel. You were planning weekends with him when I was away, talking about how much you missed him, telling him things you never told me. You've been lying to me for months." Her expression shifted, and now there was frustration in her eyes. "Jason, it's not that simple. You haven't been there for me lately. You've been so wrapped up in your own world that you didn't even notice how disconnected we've become. Chris, he was just someone I could talk to, someone who actually listened. It was like a punch to the gut. So, this is my fault now? You're saying I pushed you to do this?" "I'm not saying that, but you weren't exactly paying attention, were you?" she snapped. "You didn't even realize how distant we've been for months. Things just happened with Chris. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "So, when did it go too far?" "When you started inviting him over while I was out of town. When you stopped caring enough to even hide it properly." My voice was trembling, anger mixing with the hurt. She looked away, not meeting my eyes. "It's been a few months," she said quietly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Months. All that time, she had been lying to me, betraying me. And now she was trying to rationalize it like it was some sort of emotional necessity. "So what now, Rachel?" I asked, my voice hollow. "What do you want me to do with this?" She shrugged, coldness settling into her features. "I don't know, Jason. Maybe we both need a break. Maybe this isn't working anymore. And just like that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life. Rachel walking out of the room left me in a strange kind of silence. I could still hear the sound of her footsteps fading down the hallway, but in my head, everything felt like it had gone still. My heart was pounding, my mind spinning. What was I supposed to do now? She didn't even seem to care. No apology, no real explanation, nothing but cold indifference. I stood there for a while, trying to make sense of it all. Everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about her, about us, felt like it had been a lie. It wasn't just a betrayal with Chris. It was how easily she dismissed everything we had built, like it didn't matter, like I didn't matter. Eventually, I sat down on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, my mind replaying everything that had happened in the last hour. The shock was still there, but now something else was creeping in: anger. Not just at Rachel, but at myself. How had I missed all of this? How could I have been so blind, so trusting? I started thinking about every little sign I had brushed off over the last few months. The late nights, the sudden secrecy, her pulling away from me emotionally. I had wanted to believe she was just stressed, that it was work-related. But deep down, I think I knew. I just didn't want to face it. And now, here I was, forced to confront the truth head-on. I picked up my phone, scrolling through the text between Rachel and me from the last few months. Her messages had become shorter, more distant. There were a few times I had asked if everything was okay, and she would always brush it off with just busy with work. I believed her. I trusted her, and she had taken that trust and shattered it. Suddenly, a thought hit me like a lightning bolt. I wasn't the only one in the dark about this. Our friends, our families, they all thought we were this perfect couple. They had no idea what was happening behind closed doors. I wondered if anyone else had seen signs that I had missed, if anyone knew what Rachel had been up to. But then, just as quickly, another thought followed. What was I supposed to do now? Should I tell people? Should I call someone for advice? The weight of the decision pressed down on me. I didn't know if I was ready to open that floodgate yet. The truth was, I didn't want to deal with any of this. Not yet. It felt like too much. So I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I grabbed my keys, put on my jacket, and walked out the front door. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to get out of that house, away from the memories, away from Rachel. My feet carried me through the neighborhood, the cool night air doing little to calm the storm inside me. Every step I took, I kept thinking about her, about the woman I thought I knew, and the reality of what she had done. By the time I got back, it was late, and the house was dark. Rachel was already in bed, or at least she wasn't in the living room anymore. I stood in the doorway, staring at the empty room, wondering how we were going to move forward. Could we even move forward? I wasn't ready to face that question yet. So, I crashed on the couch, trying to push everything out of my head, but sleep didn't come easily that night. The next morning, I woke up with a stiff neck and a heavy heart. The reality of what had happened last night hit me the second I opened my eyes. Rachel had betrayed me, and now I was lying on the couch, trying to figure out what to do next. The silence of the house felt suffocating, every corner reminding me of what we once had. Rachel was already up. I could hear her moving around in the kitchen, going about her routine like nothing had changed. It was bizarre, like we were living in two different realities. For her, life seemed to go on. For me, it felt like everything had stopped. I walked into the kitchen, and there she was, casually making coffee, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up when I entered, her demeanor cool and detached. It was almost surreal how normal she seemed. "Morning," she said, her tone indifferent, as if we hadn't just had the most devastating conversation of our marriage the night before. I stared at her, trying to understand how she could act so calm, so unaffected. "Are we really just going to pretend like nothing happened last night?" I asked, my voice low, trying to keep my emotions in check. She sighed, setting her phone down, finally meeting my gaze. Jason, I don't know what you want from me. We had a fight. I admitted I screwed up. What else do you want me to say? Her words stung. A fight? That's how she was framing this? Like we'd argued over something trivial. Not the fact that she'd been lying and cheating for months. I want you to be honest, Rachel, I said, trying to hold back the frustration boiling inside me. How long were you planning on keeping this from me? And what about everything we've built together? Does it mean nothing to you? She rolled her eyes, and I could see her patience wearing thin. Jason, I don't know what to tell you. I didn't plan any of this. It just happened. Things between us haven't been the same, and Chris, he was there for me. I didn't want to hurt you. That last sentence cut deep. You didn't want to hurt me? I repeated, incredulous. But you kept seeing him, knowing full well what it would do to me if I found out. That's not something that just happens, Rachel. That's a choice. Every time you lied to my face, every time you snuck around, it was a choice. She was silent for a moment, clearly not expecting me to push back this hard. Look, Jason, I know I messed up. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't know how. And now I just don't see the point in dragging this out. Maybe we need time apart to figure things out. Time apart. The words hung in the air between us. And for the first time, I realized just how little she was invested in trying to fix this. She wasn't fighting for us, for our marriage. She was already checking out. And that hurt more than anything else. What does that mean, Rachel? I asked quietly. Do you want to end this? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her coffee, stirring it absent-mindedly. I don't know. Maybe we've just grown apart, and this is where we're headed. I felt like the floor was collapsing beneath me. Was this really happening? Just a few months ago, we were talking about starting a family, making plans for the future, and now she was ready to throw it all away. I stood there for a long moment, processing her words, trying to figure out what to say next. But the truth was, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to fix this. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to. I need some time to think. I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Rachel just nodded, not saying another word. And with that, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, feeling more lost than ever before. The woman I thought I knew had become a stranger, and I had no idea how to find my way back from here. After our conversation in the kitchen, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the unknown. I needed space, clarity, anything that could help me make sense of what had happened. I grabbed my phone and decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. Reach out to my best friend, Mike. Mike and I had been close since college, but as life got busier, we drifted apart. He'd gotten married, had kids, and moved a few towns over. We still kept in touch occasionally, but not like before. I wasn't even sure how to start this conversation, but I knew I couldn't keep everything bottled up. I shot him a quick text. Hey man, can we talk? Going through something. Need advice. It didn't take long for him to respond. Of course, Jay. You okay? Want to come over, or should we meet somewhere? I didn't want to burden him with all of this in front of his family, so I suggested we meet at a coffee shop halfway between our places. Within an hour, I was sitting across from Mike, my coffee untouched, feeling like a wreck while he listened quietly. So, what's going on? He asked, concern written all over his face. I took a deep breath and told him everything. The affair, the emails, Rachel's cold response, the suggestion of time apart. As I spoke, I could see the shock in his eyes. I had always painted such a rosy picture of my marriage, and now, here I was, revealing that it was falling apart. When I finished, Mike shook his head, leaning back in his chair. Wow, Jay, I don't even know what to say. That's a lot. I had no idea things were this bad between you two. I didn't either, I admitted. Or maybe I just didn't want to see it. But now it's like everything is falling apart, and I have no idea what to do. She's not even sorry, Mike. It's like she's already given up. He nodded slowly, thinking, Rachel always seemed so into you, man. I don't understand how she could do this. Do you think she's serious about wanting to separate? I don't know, I said. I mean, she basically said we needed time apart, but the way she said it, it didn't sound like she cared anymore. It felt like she's already made up her mind. Mike sighed, running a hand through his hair. Man, I hate to say it, but it sounds like she's checked out. I've seen this happen with a few friends before. Sometimes people just drift, but the cheating, that's on her, and the way she's handling it. She's not even trying to make things right. That last part hit hard. Rachel wasn't trying. She wasn't making any effort to fix this, to repair the damage she had caused. I had been so focused on my own feelings, my anger, my sadness, that I hadn't fully realized just how little she seemed to care about making things right. What do I do now, Mike? I asked, feeling the weight of the situation crushing me. Do I just end it? Do I try to fight for it? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. He looked at me seriously. Jay, you need to ask yourself if this is something you can live with. Can you trust her again, even if she says she's sorry? Can you really move past this? I'm not saying you should make a decision right now, but you need to think about what you want, not just what she wants. You can't be the only one fighting to save your marriage. His words stuck with me. I realized that in all the chaos of discovering the affair, I hadn't really thought about what I wanted. I was so focused on her actions, on what she was or wasn't doing, that I hadn't stopped to consider whether I even wanted to stay with someone who had betrayed me so deeply. We sat there in silence for a while, and Mike finally broke it. Whatever you decide, man, I've got your back. But don't stay with her just because you're afraid of what happens next. You deserve more than that. I nodded, grateful for his support, but still completely torn. The idea of leaving Rachel felt like ripping out a part of my life that I had built for so long. But staying with her, after everything that had happened, felt unbearable. After our conversation, I felt slightly better. Not because I had all the answers, but because I knew that whatever happened next, I had someone to lean on. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that my marriage was hanging by a thread, and I wasn't sure if it was worth saving anymore. Driving back home from my talk with Mike, I felt a strange mix of clarity and confusion. While it was reassuring to have someone like him in my corner, the weight of what I had to decide was overwhelming. The house felt different when I walked back in, like it was no longer my home, but just a place where Rachel and I coexisted, barely speaking. She was in the living room, watching some reality show, her focus entirely on the screen, as if the bombshell of our relationship hadn't been dropped just a day earlier. I went to the bedroom, grabbed my laptop, and sat down at the kitchen table. My mind kept going back to the emails, to everything I'd seen. I knew there had to be more than just a few exchanges. A part of me was terrified of what I might uncover, but I needed to know the full extent of the betrayal. I started by going through her emails again. This time, I noticed something I had missed in my initial panic: a few bookings. Hotel reservations, restaurants, all under her name but with suspicious dates. The most recent one was for a weekend I was out of town for work. She had told me she was staying home, catching up on sleep and me time. My stomach churned as I realized she had spent that time with him. But then I noticed something else. In her phone bills, I spotted frequent calls and texts to a number that didn't belong to any of her friends or family. The messages were all at odd hours, late at night, early mornings, times when she'd usually tell me she was exhausted from work. I didn't need a private investigator to figure out that this was Chris. My heart raced as I copied the number down, not even sure what I'd do with it. I closed the laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of how long this had been going on. The lies ran deeper than I had imagined. Rachel had crafted an entire separate life, filled with moments she kept hidden from me. I replayed moments from the last few months in my head. The times she would brush me off, telling me she was too tired or stressed to hang out. The weekend trips I'd taken, trusting she was home while I was away. It all felt like one big joke, with me as the punchline. Later that evening, Rachel finally came into the kitchen. She looked at me, her face emotionless, like she was just going through the motions of living under the same roof. "We need to talk," I said, surprising even myself at how calm my voice sounded. She hesitated, clearly not expecting me to push for another conversation so soon. "About what? I thought we said everything that needed to be said this morning." I shook my head, feeling a rising wave of anger. "No, we didn't. I found your hotel bookings, the ones for weekends when I was out of town, and the calls, late at night, early mornings. Was that Chris too?" Her face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly, crossing her arms defensively. "I'm not doing this again, Jason. Yes, I saw him a few times. Yes, we spent some weekends together. But we've already talked about this. You know everything now." "No, I don't," I said, my voice growing sharper. "You've been lying to me for months, and I deserve to know the truth, all of it. How long has this been going on? How much of our life has been a lie?" Rachel exhaled deeply, leaning against the counter, avoiding my gaze. For the first time, she looked genuinely uncomfortable, like she wasn't sure what to say next. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "It started about 8 months ago. I wasn't looking for anything, it just happened. Work was overwhelming. You were always busy, and Chris, he was just there. He made me feel important and noticed. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I could barely process her words. 8 months. Nearly a year of deception, of living a double life while I had been blissfully unaware. I felt a mix of rage and sadness bubbling up inside me, but I forced myself to stay composed. "So, all those nights when you said you were working late or too tired to hang out, it was him?" She nodded slowly. "Not every time, but yeah, some of those nights." I stared at her, feeling numb. "And you didn't think to stop? To tell me? To end it before it got out of hand?" Rachel looked down, avoiding eye contact. "I thought about it, but I don't know. It just felt too complicated. And then it was easier to just let it continue." That was it. She had chosen to let it continue. She had chosen him over and over, even when she knew how much it would hurt me. I had been nothing but a convenient background to her affair. I couldn't even look at her anymore. "I need space," I said, my voice strained. "I don't know how to move forward from this." Rachel didn't argue. She just nodded, almost relieved, and left the room without another word. And once again, I was left standing there, wondering if our marriage had ever truly been real. The silence after Rachel left the kitchen felt louder than anything. I sat there, staring at the empty chair where she had been just moments ago. It was like she had physically removed herself from the conversation, but also emotionally checked out long before. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of the end, no matter how much I tried to make sense of it. The truth had been laid bare, and I felt more lost than ever. 8 months. That number kept echoing in my mind. 8 months of betrayal. 8 months of her leading a double life, while I went about our relationship completely blind. I got up and walked around the house, not really knowing where I was going. The house that we had built together, the life we had shared, now felt unfamiliar. The photos of us on vacation, laughing, celebrating anniversaries, they seemed like distant memories, from another time when things were real, or at least when I thought they were. I grabbed my jacket and keys and stepped outside. I needed air, something to clear my head, to escape the weight of the situation. As I walked down the street, I realized I wasn't just escaping the house. I was trying to escape the reality of what my life had become. The more I thought about it, the more I understood that Rachel wasn't going to fight for us. She hadn't been fighting for a long time. Maybe she had given up long, before I even knew there was a problem. A few blocks away, I stopped at a park and sat on a bench, staring into the distance. Everything felt surreal. How had it come to this? A few months ago, we were talking about the future, about kids, about where we'd travel next. And now, it felt like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't pull back from. Sitting there, I realized something important. It wasn't just that Rachel had cheated. It was that she had let our marriage die. She didn't care enough to stop what she was doing, and in a way, that hurt even more than the affair itself. I wasn't sure how to move forward, but I knew one thing. I couldn't do this alone. I couldn't be the only one holding on. As I sat in the cool evening air, I realized it was time to make a decision. I could no longer live in the limbo of wondering what Rachel wanted. Now, it was about what I needed to do for myself. After the shocking conversation with Rachel, I returned to my apartment feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. The weight of the truth crashed down on me, and I struggled to comprehend how someone I had loved so deeply could betray me in such a profound way. I needed to process what had just happened, so I spent the next few days in a haze, avoiding friends and burying myself in work. But the reality wouldn't let me hide forever. Every corner of my apartment echoed with memories, and I could feel Rachel's presence lingering in the air. I tried to distract myself by diving into projects at work, but the thoughts of her infidelity gnawed at me like an unrelenting itch. One evening, as I was organizing my things, I stumbled upon a box of old letters and mementos from our early days together. The handwritten notes, filled with dreams and promises, felt like a cruel reminder of everything I had lost. Each letter was a testament to the love we once shared, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of longing for the simpler times before everything had unraveled. That night, I decided to reach out to my brother, Jake. He'd always been my confidant, the one person I could count on to give me straight talk without any sugarcoating. When he answered, I could hear the concern in his voice. "Hey, man, how are you holding up?" he asked, his tone serious. I sighed, letting the dam of emotions break. Not great, to be honest. Rachel's affair, it's worse than I thought. There's not just one guy. She was seeing someone else, too. "Damn, I'm sorry," he replied, his voice laced with sympathy. "What are you planning to do?" "I don't know yet. I thought we could salvage things after she admitted to Chris, but now it feels hopeless. I'm just tired of being hurt, you know?" "Yeah, I get it. You deserve better than this, man. Maybe it's time to focus on yourself for a while. Get away from her and all the drama." His words resonated deeply. Perhaps I had been too focused on trying to fix things that I had lost sight of my own well-being. Maybe it was time to take a step back and reevaluate my priorities. "I think you're right," I said, feeling a glimmer of determination. "I need to focus on me. I just don't know where to start." "Start by getting out of that apartment for a bit. Come stay with me for a week. We'll hit the trails, do some hiking, just get some fresh air, and clear your head." The idea was tempting. A change of scenery might help me regain some clarity. I hadn't been hiking in ages, and being outdoors always had a way of making things seem less complicated. "All right, I'll take you up on that," I finally said, feeling a bit lighter. As we talked about the plans for my visit, I felt a sense of purpose beginning to take shape. The more I discussed it, the more I realized that this was exactly what I needed: a break from the reminders of Rachel, an opportunity to breathe and reflect. In the days leading up to my trip, I packed up essentials, ready to escape the confines of my apartment. I still had a long way to go, but as I prepared to leave, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I could find a way to reclaim my life, even amidst the chaos Rachel had created. The moment I stepped into Jake's house felt like a breath of fresh air. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to start navigating my way through it. Jake's house was a stark contrast to my apartment, filled with light, laughter, and the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. It was comforting and familiar, a safe haven where I could finally begin to unravel the tangled mess of my emotions. The first few days flew by as Jake and I hiked through the nearby trails, immersing ourselves in nature. The physical activity was invigorating, allowing me to shed some of the heaviness that had clung to me for so long. Each step I took felt like a step away from my past, and with every sunrise, I began to feel more like myself. One afternoon, after an especially challenging hike, we sat on a cliff overlooking a vast expanse of greenery, breathing in the crisp air. I looked out at the horizon, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in ages. Jake turned to me and asked, "What do you think you want moving forward?" I paused, considering his question. I guess I want to focus on myself for once. I've spent so much time trying to save my marriage. I forgot what makes me happy. I want to rediscover that. Jake nodded, a knowing smile on his face. That sounds like a solid plan. You've got to take care of yourself first. The rest will fall into place. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything that had transpired. I realized I didn't need to rush into anything new or make any hasty decisions about my future. Healing takes time, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about the journey ahead. When I returned to my apartment after the trip, I did so with a renewed perspective. I started rearranging my space, discarding items that reminded me of Rachel. I donated clothes I no longer wore and filled the walls with artwork that inspired me. Each change felt like a small victory. A few weeks later, I decided to try a few classes, yoga, cooking, and even some creative writing. It was exhilarating to explore new interests and meet new people. I was surprised at how quickly I began to feel a sense of community. One evening, while attending a cooking class, I struck up a conversation with a woman named Lily. We connected over our love for food and travel, and she had a warmth that drew me in. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but it felt nice to share laughter and good food again. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself opening up more, not just to new experiences, but to the idea of love again. I was still cautious, still healing, but I was learning to embrace the unknown. Eventually, I finalized the divorce from Rachel. The process was bittersweet, but I felt a profound sense of relief as I signed the papers. It was official. I was free. In the end, I learned that life doesn't always go according to plan. Sometimes, it shatters in ways you never expect. But from those pieces, you can rebuild something beautiful, something that's truly yours. I had faced betrayal, heartache, and uncertainty, but I was emerging stronger and more resilient than ever. My journey wasn't over, but now I approached each day with hope and a renewed sense of purpose. As I stood on my balcony one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I had learned to let go, to embrace the present, and to trust that brighter days were ahead. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited about what the future might hold.